I'm Chris Knauf, class of '95. I was the back captain from '94 to '95. So during those years, it was a very large club. We had a lot of kids come out every year, and some of the great tours we went on. I remember freshman year, we went down to Georgetown for the Cherry Blossom Tournament, and just tremendous. It was the first time a lot of us had ever been exposed to a large-scale tournament like that, with a few clubs from all over the country were there, and we played some tremendous games down there. We were getting beaten to hell in some of them, and other ones we had just totally dominated. I remember playing Scranton and at that game, and they had this guy that they called Shaq. He was just a monster of a guy, and he would just plow over all of us. It was a tough road to hoe, but lots of fun down in that Georgetown one, to the point where we became good friends with the guys from the Georgetown club. Eventually would go back down for a road trip down there to go and play them just on their field, and tremendous time, lots of good games there, and really just sort of went down there and basically really had the whole team had to get on the bus at 4 o'clock in the morning to get down there for an 11 o'clock game. So it was tough getting everybody on the bus at that point.
I can imagine.
Another great tour, we went to the Bahamas in '95. We took the club down to the Nassau, Bahamas for, there were some sevens tournaments going on, but we scheduled a couple of games. One game was with Scranton, which was really a fun game because it was, it's spring break, it was a little bit more casual, it was just the club, and so we organized a quick pickup game, and then we played University of Miami, who was down there preparing for trying to win a national title. So they had different expectations about the level of play that they were supposed to be on spring break. So really was sort of made it through the first half, and then we decided, you know what, we're getting killed. Everybody just get on the bus and we're getting the hell out of here. And just bailed on it. But one of the best trips to this day, people from who went on that trip say that was one of the most fun times I've ever had. Just being together and going out at nights and playing rugby those days and just hanging out at the beach. It was the close camaraderie and some of the going on these crazy a booze cruise or whatever it was. Some of the best times people to this day still talk about. Some almost 20 years later. So a lot of fun there. We used to play at the time we were playing against Army every year. And I remember one game we get out there. We drive up to West Point in the morning. We get there for a game, and we're out playing, and Army and naturally just beating us up, breaking us apart. And all of a sudden, this helicopter comes, lands on the field next to us. These guys come running out of a building, run into the helicopter. This is in the middle of the game. All the Fairfield Ruggers are stopped and watching this thing. Meanwhile, Army's still playing. Helicopter loads up with the guys, takes off, goes straight up like 2,000 feet. Everybody jumps out of the plane, lands in the field next to him, grabs their parachutes, and runs back into the building in the middle of the game. And we're all like, what the hell was that? It was the craziest thing. And the Army guys it was natural, normal for them. And I don't think anybody from Fairfield had ever been that close to a helicopter. So it really was just an interesting experience. And I remember, those Army games were really, really hard on everybody. One of the only injury my brother ever sustained playing rugby was in an Army game right here on Grower Field, and we're putting up a good game. I think we were winning that game, and my mother goes, well, it's great to see that nobody got hurt. And just as she says that, somebody shouts, get an ambulance! And sure enough, my brother had broken his collarbone in like 4 places and had to get rushed off to the emergency room. So crazy. Those were always just like the hardest games ever. Lots of fun on those pieces, and we had just a great group from my freshman year to my senior year. We had it was such a great group of people, from the Ed Ruggamers and Jimmy Bagleys and Don Puhala guys, and Tommy Kramer, and Eamon Curry and Charlie Kirsten, guys who I still stay in touch with and try to get together whenever we can. And then the guys who are also who I graduated with, the John Boyles, Brian McCluskey's, who were still all very, very close friends and talk regularly. And then the people who were below us too, the Brian Lynches and Brian Dufells. Those, everybody's always still been very close and have, followed our careers and our lives and families many, many years now past graduation. So, we had, I know would always be able to field 3 to 4 sides every game from my freshman year through my senior year. It was never any sort of, even in the spring, there never any shortage of people wanting to come out and play. And what I think was great about that is, it was always sort of, we never really had a formal, you always had one coach, but he was kind of in and out, and it was really self-taught from the seniors teaching it down. So to have that sort of consistency and sort of depth really made it sort of a special period. So, and we'd go and play a lot of, games, and, some seasons we would get demolished and barely win anything, and some we'd go almost undefeated. I never quite went undefeated when I was there. I know we've had much more success after I left. Mm-hmm. At one point we were under probation because of an incident after a drink up that had nothing to do with the club but was guilt by association. And it was always trouble to keep the field. A lot of times they wanted to use it for other things. I remember when Prep started wanted to use our field for football, or they put all the soccer goals onto the Grower field. Well, we would go out there, they would put the soccer goals on, and we told everybody, all right, lift those goals up and throw them down the hill. They don't belong here. And just to be like, look, this field was for rugby, should always be for rugby, and we always wanted to make that clear. It was a little contentious. Yeah. So the year after we were on, the club had come off of probation. It was myself, my brother, Brian Lynch, and Brian Duffel were sitting around and saying, the club clearly has an image problem. We need to fix that. It just is associated with debauchery and roughhousing, and really not a game that it can be played. So how do we kind of soften that image? And we said, well, why don't we start a women's rugby club to help out, soften our image, soften the game's approach, and sort of the understanding of how it is at the university. So we went to the athletic director at the time, said, look, we're interested in doing this. We just need to see what we need to do to get going. They said, just go right ahead. So we went out like we normally do back then to publicize an event. Just put out, they used to have a big room you fill out with markers and draw, put up a big poster that said women's rugby tryouts that Thursday or whatever it was. And so that they came, we didn't think anybody was going to show up. Sure enough, it was myself and my brother, Andrew Knauf, and Brian Lynch and Brian Duffel, and I think a couple other guys showed up to see what was, to run the practice. And sure enough, there was a good group of probably about 15 women who came out and who were really interested and engaged and wanted to play rugby. So we began teaching them the game. And the only club that we knew in the area that was another women's club was up at Sacred Heart University. So we found out through the men's club who to contact on the women's team, organized a game, had them come over to Grower Field for the first sort of scrimmage. And sure enough, the Fairfield Women's Club just demolished them. And it was amazing to see, because here are these girls who had never even tackled somebody else before, were out there just taking big hits and making big plays, and really were starting to grasp the concept of rugby, and then it took off from there. So that is how the women's rugby team really got started in terms of being something here at the university. And then then after that sort of initial period, the women got together and took care of it themselves. So they always kind of worked very closely with the men's club to sort of keep learning the game, but then they just took right off. Once I think the women realized that they didn't need to get permission or knew any of that they could do this on their own, then they just took right off. And that club has just gone to completely different levels just from that. Amazing. Yeah. To think that they've outdone the men in a shorter period of time is not surprising, actually. Yeah. So we had selections was a very important part of the process. So everyone would sit around, and you'd have the president and the 2 captains at the time, and 3 other upperclassmen would sit on a Thursday night, and you would discuss each person in each position and decide from their attendance, their attitude, and their ability, always in that order, about who should be playing and what should be, how we're going to be setting up the lineup for the next weekend's game. And you would always have 2 freshmen there to observe the process, so they would know when it was their time to sit at the selections, that they would understand that, look, there's a lot of goofing off and fun stuff, but this is actually, everybody takes it very serious. And their job was really to just make sure that anybody who was sitting there never ran out of beer. So they were always constantly sort of filling everybody's cup up and observing and listening, and then having to watch everybody who was empty. So it was a great process to sort of bring people along, introduce them to the club, and it was also a real important process that everybody knew that what's important in the club and how you get to play is, if you show up, if you have a great attitude, it doesn't make a difference if you have the best ability or not. If those things, you don't have those first 2 things, you're not going to play. And we had lots of serious conversations about some great players who had terrible attitudes, who never really showed up. They didn't have their days, or they had a terrible attitude. We sat them, put them in a different, they never played A's, they would play B's or C's. Those were important things, and it was interesting to kind of always remember those things as we kind of went through.
Yeah, that's great.